Everyone in the city knew him, not by face but by name. His name appeared regularly in newspapers, financial magazines, and breaking business headlines. He was known as a billionaire who had built an empire from nothing, a man whose decisions could move markets and change industries overnight. People admired his discipline, his intelligence, and his relentless drive for success. To the outside world, his life looked flawless: luxury homes, private cars, exclusive meetings, and unlimited power. But what the headlines never mentioned was how empty his evenings were. Behind the tailored suits and expensive watches was a man who lived alone in a house far too quiet for its size. He ate most of his meals by himself, staring at screens instead of people. Conversations in his life were usually about profits, losses, and projections. Over the years, he had learned to trust numbers more than emotions and contracts more than human promises. Feelings, he believed, were inefficient. That evening, after a long day of meetings, he made an unusual decision. Instead of dining at a five-star restaurant or ordering a private chef, he walked into a small, ordinary restaurant tucked between old buildings. It was far from his usual luxury spots: no valet parking, no soft music, no polished marble floors, just simple tables, warm lights, and the sound of quiet conversations. The restaurant was filled with working-class families, tired employees finishing late dinners, and people counting coins before ordering. The billionaire blended in effortlessly. No one recognized him, no one stared, no one whispered his name. For the first time in years, he felt invisible, and strangely, he liked it. He took a seat near the corner, scanned the modest menu, and placed a simple order. As he waited, he observed the room: a mother sharing food with her child, an elderly man eating slowly alone, a group of workers laughing despite their exhaustion. There was something raw and real about the place, something his world of glass offices and private lounges had long forgot. As minutes passed, the billionaire leaned back in his chair, unaware that this small decision, to step into an ordinary restaurant on an ordinary night, was quietly setting the stage for something extraordinary. He had walked in expecting nothing more than a quiet meal. He had no idea that before the night ended, his understanding of wealth, power, and humanity would be challenged in a way no business deal ever had. And that this ordinary night was about to change his life forever. When it was time to pay, he handed over his card without a second thought. It was a habit formed over decades, one smooth motion, no hesitation, no concern. Money had never been a question in his life. The cashier took the card and swiped it casually, already reaching for the receipt. Then the machine beeped. A sharp, unwelcome sound. The screen flashed red, declined. For a brief second, the billionaire assumed it was a technical error. The cashier frowned slightly and apologized, swiping the card again. The machine paused, processed, and once more displayed the same message. Declined. The line behind him grew restless. Someone cleared their throat. Another person shifted impatiently. A low murmur spread through the restaurant, quiet but noticeable. The billionaire felt heat rise to his face and tighten his chest. He stood frozen, unsure how to respond. This wasn't just a decline card. It was a crack in the flawless image he had lived behind for years, the image of a man who always had control, always had solutions, always had access. For the first time in decades, he felt exposed. He pulled out his phone, his fingers moving faster than usual, and opened his banking app. A notification stared back at him. His account had been temporarily frozen due to suspicious activity, a routine security measure, normally a minor inconvenience. But tonight it felt like humiliation. He had billions in assets, properties across the world, and companies earning millions by the hour. Yet standing in that modest restaurant, surrounded by strangers, he couldn't pay for a simple meal. The cashier looked uncomfortable. "Sir, you can step aside while I help the next customer," she said gently, trying to spare him embarrassment. "I'll fix it," he replied quietly, forcing calm into his voice. He stepped to the side, holding his phone, pretending to make calls that wouldn't connect fast enough. The whispers grew louder. He avoided eye contact, his confidence shrinking with every passing second. For the first time in his life, he understood how it felt to be judged in silence. He wasn't angry at the cashier, he wasn't even angry at the bank. He was angry at himself for building a life where his worth felt tied entirely to a piece of plastic. As he stood there, feeling smaller than he ever had despite his vast wealth, a thought crossed his mind. Is this what powerlessness feels like? Before he could finish dialing another number, a soft, hesitant voice broke through the tension from behind him. "Sir." He turned, unaware that those few words were about to lead to the most unforgettable moment of his life, and a lesson money had never taught him. "Sir, you can take my money." The voice was small, hesitant, yet steady enough to cut through the tension hanging in the air. The billionaire turned around slowly, unsure if he had heard correctly. Standing a few steps behind him was a little girl no more than 9 years old. Her clothes were faded, her shoes worn thin at the edges. In her hands she held a tiny cloth pouch gripped tightly as if it were precious. With trembling fingers she stepped forward and opened it, pouring its contents onto the counter. Coins spilled out, small, uneven, and dull with age. They clinked softly as they formed a modest pile. It wasn't much, not even close to covering a full meal, but it was obvious to everyone in the room that this was not spare change. These were carefully saved coins, collected one by one, likely over weeks or months. The room fell completely silent. The cashier froze, the people in line stopped whispering. Even the sounds from the kitchen seemed to fade. All eyes were on the little girl and the coins she had just given away without hesitation. The billionaire stared at the counter, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. He slowly knelt down to her level, his voice gentle, almost unsteady. "Why would you do that?" he asked. "You don't even know me." The girl looked up at him, her expression simple and sincere. "Because you looked sad," she said. Then after a brief pause, she added, "My mom says when someone needs help, you help, even if you're poor." The words struck him like a blow. In that moment, the weight of every deal he had ever closed, every fortune he had accumulated, felt insignificant. He had negotiated billion-dollar contracts without blinking, but this small act of generosity shattered something deep inside him. He didn't see poverty anymore. He saw courage. He saw kindness. He saw a heart richer than his own. Moments later, after finally reaching his bank and resolving the issue, he returned to the counter and paid in cash. The transaction went through smoothly this time, but it no longer mattered. Because the real price of that meal had already been paid. Paid in humility. Paid in truth. Paid in a lesson no amount of money could ever buy. As he stood there, the billionaire realized something unsettling and beautiful at the same time. Wealth had never made him generous, comfort had made him careless. And it took a poor little girl, offering everything she had, to remind him what true richness really looked like. Before leaving the restaurant, the billionaire paused. He looked around the room one last time, the worn tables, the tired faces, the quiet dignity of people simply trying to get through another day. Moments earlier, this place had been just a stop for a meal. Now it felt like the site of a personal awakening. Without drawing attention, he walked back to the counter and spoke softly to the manager. He settled his own bill and then quietly paid for every meal in the restaurant. No announcements were made, no applause followed. The gesture passed almost unnoticed, just as he intended. He then returned to the little girl. Gently, he placed her coins back into the small pouch, closing it carefully as if it were something sacred. Along with it, he slipped in a folded note and an envelope. The help inside wasn't flashy or overwhelming, but it was enough to change her family's future. Support for education, stability for her mother, hope where uncertainty had lived for far too long. "This is yours," he said softly. "You reminded me of something I had forgotten." The girl smiled, not fully understanding the weight of what had just happened, but feeling that it mattered. He didn't take photos. He didn't call his assistant. He didn't tell the media. For once, there was no press release, no headline, no attempt to turn kindness into a brand. He simply walked out. The night air felt different as he stepped onto the quiet street. The city lights, usually symbols of success and ambition, seemed less important than they ever had before. As he walked, his mind replayed the moment, the sound of coins hitting the counter, the courage in a child's voice, the sincerity of her words. That night, sitting alone in his vast home, the silence no longer felt empty, it felt reflective. For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about profits or growth charts, he was thinking about meaning. He realized something no balance sheet, no financial report, no business victory had ever taught him. True wealth isn't measured by what you own. It's measured by what you are willing to give, especially when you have very little. The little girl had given everything she had without expecting anything in return. And in doing so, she had given a powerful man something priceless, a new definition of wealth. A lesson he would carry for the rest of his life.